Hey, welcome back to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. This is episode 71. Thank you so much to those of you who listened and wrote into me after last week's podcast with Stephanie Tate. I know that really touched many of your hearts. It certainly touched my own heart. It was a special, special time. We talked about suffering and wholeness, dignity for those with disabilities, and how people with chronic pain can be welcomed into your community, and how your community can do its best to ensure those who don't receive immediate healing in response to your prayers still feel welcomed and still feel safe to share their story in your community. So really, really special. Thank you to everyone once again who wrote to me after that one. This week is another really quite special discussion. I had the honor of meeting Andrew and Norine Brunson. Andrew Brunson was the pastor who was imprisoned in Turkey for 2 years. He's been out now for a bit over a year, and I got to sit down with them in person and hear their story, how Andrew survived, how his faith survived, how he learned to stand in the dark, to feel utterly removed from the presence of God, to feel utterly alone, and to somehow in there develop a devotional approach to God where he would fight for his intimacy with God each and every day. So I don't want to give away too much, obviously, but this was a special time getting to meet with them and share some space and hear their story from their own mouths. My apologies, the audio quality isn't incredible. We were in quite an echoey room, and I've done the best I can to clean up the audio, but you'll notice that my own portions are pretty quiet, so my apologies for that. Anyway, I'll get out of the way, and let's listen to Andrew and Norine Brunson's story. What is life like now? I can't imagine that was a trivially easy transition to normalcy.
Well, anything compared to what life was like is wonderful. And so I'm really enjoying life after prison. And what was really difficult about the time there were a number of difficulties. But if someone had told me it'll be 2 years and then you get out, then I would have just pressed in and held on, and it would be difficult, but I would start counting the days. I did not know how long I would be in prison. The Turkish government at one point asked for 3 life sentences in solitary confinement for me. And so I did not know if I'd ever be with my children again or be with my wife again. And so it was living with that uncertainty of, I don't know that I'll ever get out. And so that was a very heavy thing. To be out of that, to be free again, I can call my kids whenever I want to, and I'm with Norine all the time. That's just wonderful. To be free again is amazing. Now there was a transition, obviously, and there was residual trauma that I had to work through to some degree, but actually I'd received a lot of healing already. I was broken a great deal in the first year of prison. Came to the point of being suicidal and had many questions and doubts. The second year, God began to rebuild me. I went through a rebuilding process with them so that I actually came out of prison relatively strong. And so there'd already been a good deal of healing that took place in that process of him rebuilding me. I'm not saying it was complete, but so when I came out, I did have trauma, but it didn't dominate. And so it's been wonderful to be out. It's great. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to go back to prison again.
So where I still see the effects on him, I still see that he has problems with sleeping. And of nightmares, I should say. Not problems with sleeping, but problem with nightmares. And the other day I said, how'd you sleep? I asked most days. And so I spent hours being pursued and captured and trying to escape and, this kind of thing. So that has maybe been kept alive by a combination of, writing the book was good. I think it was good to kind of process and work through these things, get it down on paper, etc. It also brought things up.
Of course.
And talking about it keeps it there, So, I mean, that's okay. This is God's story. No. It's God's story, and it's our story. So no, it's good. But a combination of those things probably just leads to some of the nightmares.
Yeah. So have you been able to, is there been a normal life, or is it kind of like, now we're telling the story for 18 months straight since you're released?
Well, we have a new normal. Our normal before was ministry in Turkey, largest unevangelized country in the world. So Norine has often said there's never a dull day. It wasn't always good, but it was never dull. We were involved in church planting and work with refugees, a house of prayer, some training. So we had a fulfilling ministry there. In 2009, God had spoken to me and given an assignment: prepare for harvest, prepare for a powerful move of God. And so we were focused on that. I think that my imprisonment was actually serving that assignment, because there was an unprecedented prayer movement that God raised up focused on me. This is what I've been told by church historians, that they don't know of another movement like this. And so I became aware while I was in prison. So God had given us the assignment: prepare for harvest, prepare for a move of God. And when we were arrested for deportation, first I thought, well, this can't be, because we're supposed to be here preparing for harvest. Has this assignment been canceled in some way? And then as my imprisonment dragged on and we became aware of this prayer movement that was growing around the world, I started to see, actually God is using this. What was intended to harm me, He's actually using it for good. And He's drawing in millions of His sons and daughters around the world to just pour prayer into this darkest region of the world. Mm-hmm. And this is preparation for harvest. So I came to see that my imprisonment was an assignment from God. So you asked, what is life normal now? Well, it's a new normal where we had a very clear objective before. We still have it, but now in very different circumstances. And so I think God has taken us out of that ministry we had. We can't go back to Turkey at this point, although we would love to go back. And He has new things ahead of us. But it's still focused on seeing His kingdom come in the Muslim world.
So yes, it is a transition time. How can we do that? Yes. What is our part now outside of Turkey?
Yes.
And that's what we're just waiting on God and praying into. But I do miss God has good things ahead. Yes. But I do miss the clear assignment we had there. As he said, it wasn't always easy, but there was clarity, and I had such certainty in the years in Turkey. I will back up and say I didn't want to go there. I cried on the plane on the way over because I felt my life was finished.
Sure, yeah.
However, God really tied my heart there within the first 3-4 years, and I was so committed and just had such a sense, yes, this is where we're supposed to be. That's a huge blessing.
Yes.
Not everybody has that in the situation they're in. And so we don't have that right now. We don't have as much clarity. We have some pieces, and in time, God's going to just be leading us. But there was definitely a life there. There are people from there that we miss. I miss it terribly.
Sure. Rhythms, familiarity.
And I'm looking forward to what's ahead, because God took us through something and He used it. So many people who experience persecution, they're certainly going to be rewarded. God values it so highly because it's being done for His sake, for the sake of Jesus. And it's one of the ways that we demonstrate His supremacy, His great worth, if we're willing to undergo persecution and suffering for His sake, it is a testimony to His great worth. He is worthy of this, and He is worth it as well. I'm willing to do this because of who He is. So those people will be rewarded. God highly values it. But we've been given the privilege of seeing some of the results of it in our own lives. And many people will just see it in heaven. Whereas I can actually see some of the things that came from it. So what was intended to harm me and was intended for evil, God turned it around and leveraged it for the kingdom and is bringing great good out of it.
And one of the things, so there are many things we've seen him bring out of it, and I think that will continue. But one of the things is just that there's been, even in the last year, there's been an increase in the number of people, young people coming into churches in Turkey. Not just, a number of churches all over the country. Wow. And so there's been a real increase in the number of seekers and people making professions of faith.
So they come in and say, I don't know what I believe, but I know that I'm not a Muslim. I don't want to be a Muslim anymore. And so they come in seeking and asking for prayer. And several churches have told us that they tie this directly to all of the prayer that poured into Turkey because of our situation.
So huge encouragement to us.
Yeah, wow. It's like, I got a picture as you say that, it's like you take a big bucket of water and you try and pour it on a tiny little dot. Well, it's just going to splash everywhere. So all this prayer is being poured out on.
That's a great way to,
but it's just
illustrate it.
Over this entire nation.
Yes. At some point, I had a sense that, yes, people are praying for Andrew, but there's in some sense, whether they're specifically praying for Turkey or not, that God is using it for Turkey. And that was a great illustration that you just gave.
So I've said before is I rode a wave of prayer out of Turkey, but a tsunami of prayer crashed into Turkey.
Right. How long were you in Turkey?
We were there 23 years by choice and 2 years by force. Yes. So just over 25 years.
So I don't know how old you are, but I'm saying
I'm 52 now.
That's your career.
Yes.
Yes. That's your life.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And, we anticipated being there until the end.
Were the kids born there or here? Or
two of our boys two of our kids were born there. Yeah. Our sons were born there.
Yeah. And our kids were raised there. They went to Turkish schools. We expected, as I said, we had that assignment to prepare for harvest, and I fully expect that there will be a great move of God in that country in our lifetime. So we thought that we would be there to see it in person, and maybe we will be. Yes, sure. But so we had no anticipation of leaving. It was a complete surprise to us when we were arrested.
Yeah, you get that sense from the book that you're blindsided. I appreciated you honestly walking the reader through, okay, well, seems like this is what's going to happen. Nope. Okay, it seems like this is what's going to, and it was, I obviously, I wasn't there, but I did feel that you invited us quite intimately into the present tense, moment by moment, kind of wave after wave after wave.
The verse that became my theme verse in prison was Isaiah 50, verse 10, chapter 50, verse 10, which goes something like this. For the one who is walking in darkness and has no light, let him trust in the name of his God and lean on him. And that's how I felt a lot of the time, that I was in the dark and I was having to learn how to stand in the dark. So God is saying in that verse, he's saying to Israel, who was in exile, they were in darkness. And he didn't say, oh, you're in darkness, let me give you some light. He's actually saying, so you're in darkness, so now it's time to trust in the name of your God and to lean on him. So he didn't remove their difficult situations at that time. And so that's how I felt, is I don't know what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. I don't know if I'll ever get out. I'm in the dark. And this is when I have to just lean in to God. And that's not a leaning in from emotion. It's not, I didn't feel good. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel joy. I had no sense of certainty. People say, oh, you just were trusting God. Well, I haven't figured trust out. What was I to trust him for? Right. Usually when we say that we trust God, we're actually trusting for a specific outcome. And I couldn't do that. There was no verse that said, Andrew, you're going to get out of prison. Or Andrew, you're going to survive this. So what could I hold on to? And so it became much more of an intentional focusing on God and saying, I am going to lean into you, even though I'm in the darkness and I don't know what's coming or how this will be resolved. I need to learn to stand in the dark.
Wow. I feel like we don't want to do that. I think...
No, I didn't want to do it either.
Well, I mean, aside from the obvious suffering, like, I feel like we're not perhaps super well prepared in the West, in the church in the West, for that kind of framework. Am I off base? Do you feel...
I don't think that we are prepared. This is I have a real sense of urgency, especially for the next generation, for my children's age. They're 24, 22, 18. And I don't think that my generation is prepared to suffer persecution either, but at least we have a big head start as far as our walk with God. But the younger generation, I think of the increasing hostility toward those who stand publicly for Jesus, or not even publicly, but who identify clearly with Jesus and his teaching. And I think there's increasing hostility, and it will be increasingly costly to take that stand. I don't think many people are prepared for that.
There's not that expectation in this part of the world.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we had counted the cost in Turkey. There were threats over the years. I had been attacked once by a gunman. So there were some things that we went into, for example, working on the Syrian-Turkish border with refugees, where there was a level of risk. And we evaluated that, and we went in saying, we're counting this cost. I'm the first person who's been in prison in Turkey, certainly as a missionary for his faith. And so we didn't count that as part of the cost. So how does one prepare for persecution? One of the main ways to do it, I don't know how much you can prepare your heart for what you're going to suffer until you're actually going through it. Yes. You don't know what your emotions will be, how you'll react. And I thought I would be much stronger than I was from the biographies I'd read. I see, these very strong believers who go through difficulties. And I thought that I would be like that. But I didn't sense strength. I had pursued God's presence for years. And his presence was so important to me. And it still is. But that was removed from me for those 2 years of prison. So this was what really surprised me. It shocked me. Because I thought, well, I've read about other people, I've heard about others, and, they had this sense of joy, of strength, a sense of grace that was over them, and it was difficult, but, man, they also had God's presence, and I thought, God, I've been pursuing your presence for years, and I've had experiences of your presence. Why would you remove that sense in my most difficult time? And that's really what I knew that persecution could come, and I knew that what was happening to me was persecution. I didn't like it, but as part of my worldview, part of my mindset, that yes, I can now interpret this because it is persecution. What really shocked me was, Lord, in the midst of the persecution, in the midst of my difficulties, where are you? And so how can you prepare yourself for that? Well, there are a couple of things that one can do. But the thing that I think is most important to begin with is a framework, which is to say persecution is a possibility. It can happen. And if we begin to, Jesus warned us that if we don't have that as part of our mindset, if we don't expect it, then when it comes, it blindsides us. And then there are some things that can happen. First of all, we can be overwhelmed with fear. And when you're overwhelmed with fear, and I've become an expert on fear, is when I was overwhelmed with fear, the reaction was, I want to run. And it took me about a year in prison before I got to the point where I would say consistently, I said it during the first year, but where I could say it consistently, God, I'm willing to remain in prison if this is what serves your purposes. But it took me about a year of really struggling to that point. And so and
it was still a struggle.
It was still a struggle.
Still a daily struggle.
But at least consistently, I was every day fighting to get to that point. I'd say I'd wake up in the morning with fear and dread, and I'd start fighting through, okay, God, I want to submit my will to you. If this is going to serve your purposes, then give me the strength to endure, because I can't on my own. Give me the strength to endure and to be faithful. And by evening, I'd usually reach a point of peace, the highest point of peace I could get in prison. And then the next morning, I'd wake up with the same fear and the same anxiety and discouragement and have to start that battle over again. So yesterday's victory did not carry over in a significant way to the next day. So then there was the need to fight through again. Now, there's an upward trajectory over time, so it never became easy. But that became my goal. So one of the things, if we're not prepared for persecution, then when fear comes, we're going to run away. And one of the things we need to do is set an anchor where we say a foundation where we say, this is where I will stand. I will not turn away from Jesus. I will follow him even in difficulty. And just get our mindset so that when fear comes and we do want to run away, we say no. And so if we're not prepared, we can also be deceived more easily. We'll look for teachers who will help us to justify compromise. We can be offended at God by what he does or doesn't do. And this was one of the big things that I struggled with, is my offense toward God. That first year especially. Where is your presence? Why aren't you speaking to me? Feel like you've abandoned me and turned me over to be savaged here. And why am I not getting, speak to me in dreams, give me your voice, give me your presence, all these things. And I came to realize I was asking a lot of questions of God, but he had questions for me. Andrew, are you going to be faithful? Andrew, are you going to love me even when you don't sense my presence, even when you have doubts? Are you going to remain faithful to me? So it wasn't God's love and God's faithfulness that were being put to the test. They never are. He is constant. It was my faithfulness and my love that was being put to the test. And as I became aware of this, then I became more determined. I'm going to fight for my relationship with God. So there is a need to prepare our mindset to even have it. That's the beginning, just even having the mindset of this can happen, and I'm going to make the decision now that I'm going to be faithful.
I struggle relationally, theologically. Why does God, or would God, is it like a test that we pass or fail? Is it like revealing our character to ourselves? Where do you go with how to...
So you can write books about this, right? It's a big subject. I don't believe that God causes all our difficulties.
Sure.
But he uses our difficulties, the circumstances we're in, to test us. God does test his children. And when I look at some of the friends of God in the Bible, they went through periods of the silence of God, periods of uncertainty. And I think that it was going through these things that actually brought them to the point where they could be friends of God. And so I don't know why I don't know why God had to or decided not to give me a sense of his presence for 2 years in the most difficult time. I still don't understand it. I do see some of the results. And one of them was this tested love. I go through now and I say, yes, my love and faithfulness were tested and they were proved genuine. And this gives me a different kind of confidence in my relationship with God. Yes. This is tested, proven love. Yes. You can say my love can be completely sincere and true. Yes. But until it's been tested, it isn't proven. Yes, and so I think of Abraham or David or Moses or different people like that who went through those difficulties. They come out of them still trusting God, still walking with him. And that kind of positions you so that then you can receive more from him.
God deals with us so individually, but I think that in your case, that his silence was part of the test for you. I remember a friend saying this years ago. Sometimes God is silent during the test. We're taking a test and he's not, he's silent. I think that was the case for you, not for everybody.
So God does test. And one of the turning point for me, there were several things involved in this turning point, but I had really been broken for months, and I was suicidal, and I'd try to fight my way back to God, and then something would happen, and I'd get really discouraged again. And But there was a turning point where I'd read about how many Christians go into the valley of testing. The valley of testing is full of skeletons and dry bones of Christians who have not survived. Now, they may still go to heaven, but the issue is their relationship with God hasn't survived. And they've lost their friendship with God, and they then lead lives that have very little fruit. And this just hit me, and I thought, oh God, here I've served you for 23 years in Turkey, and I've come to a point where my relationship is completely suffocated. Not completely, but almost to that point. And I made a decision. I am going to fight for my relationship with you. So I thought, I don't want to be one of those skeletons. I want to survive this testing. Now, it can sound very brutal. Why is God doing that? As I said, I'm not saying that God is the one who causes all these difficulties, but he does use those testing periods. And when you're being tested, it's so important that you make it through the test. And what was knocking me out especially was offense toward God. And there were a couple of things I did that dealt with offense. One, I made the decision, and I said to God almost defiantly, which is a silly thing, but I was like, whatever you do, God, whatever you do or don't do, I will follow you. It's like, you're going to see. Even if you don't speak to me, I'm still going to follow you. Even if you don't give me your presence, you'll see. I'm going to follow you. And it was like a determination. You haven't given me your voice, you haven't given me your presence, but I'm going to hold on. Now, even at my strongest point, my strongest strength is still pretty weak, still pretty pitiful. But God, I think he loves it when we press in. And he met me there, and that just invited his grace in a different way. And so I call it, I began cooperating with God's grace in a sense. But it was a decision. I'm determined, intentional about hanging on to you. And a second thing that was very important was I visualized a lockbox in my imagination. I visualized it, and I took all of these questions and doubts, and I put them into the box. So I just visualized, I'm putting these into the box. I'm putting it in, and then I closed the lock. And this, in my mind, this was a high-tech box, and it had a digital handprint. And so I just put my handprint on it and said, God, the only one who can open this box is you and me. I can open it. You can open it. You can open it if you want to. If you want to deal with these things that I'm going through that I can't figure out, then go ahead. But I make the decision that I will not open this box. I will not entertain these doubts and questions anymore. I make the decision that I do not need to have answers to have a relationship with you. Wow. So those doubts and questions were suffocating me before. Wow. I felt that I could not receive truth. So Norine would come in. We had a visit. It became a regular thing once a week for 35 minutes in one prison. Then they put me in a maximum security prison, and there I had 1 hour a week. And this was gold to me. And that was the only contact I had with a believer. So Norine would come in, and she had this pressure, this weight that she had to come in and deal with her husband who's, just falling apart, and come in and encourage me. And sometimes she would speak truth to me because I had all these questions, and I didn't have anybody else who could correct me. And I
will just say that I didn't have the answers either. I didn't have the clear truth to bring into it.
So,
either.
We're speaking through, reinforced glass with bars and on a telephone. And that was our contact. And she would speak to me, and she would speak truth to me and sometimes correct what I was saying, but I couldn't receive it. And when I'd read the Bible, part of the time they held me in 4 to 5 different places. And some places I could have a Bible, some places I couldn't. But when I did have the Bible, I was reading it. I just had a hard time receiving truth. It's because I would say, yes, but. Yes, but because the doubts, the questions, the hurt, the offense would come in. And so when I put those in that box and I made that decision, yes, of course, after that, those thoughts would still come to my mind, those doubts, but I would say, no. Yes, I still have them. I still have doubts and questions, but no, I will not entertain these thoughts. And I'd go back to that box. And it was a decision that then I was being suffocated. My relationship with God was being strangled. And that opened it up so I could begin to receive again. Now, he didn't give me a sense of his presence after this. I didn't suddenly feel strength and joy. I didn't throughout my whole time in prison. But what it did is it opened it up so that I'm now committed. I'm determined. I'm going to fight for that relationship with God. And
come on, man.
Yes. And I'm going to put aside offense as much as possible. And those are some of the things that changed my time in prison from just continual brokenness to very, very difficult and still brokenness, but on an upward trajectory where God began to heal me of some things and to rebuild me so that I actually came out stronger at the end.
So knowing how low he was at many points, I could see these were clear victories. Someone outside might think, oh, that's a small victory.
Sure.
Knowing the circumstances and how, in the despair that he was in, for him to be saying or writing some of the things that he wrote, I say, wow, this is victory.
Yes.
This is victory. This is big.
Yes. It sounds to me like some form of purification. I'm sure everybody's looking to analyze your experience and put a bow on it, and put a label on it, and be like, it's like this.
Well, I was just reading a verse, he who is suffering in the body is basically done with sin. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but it does tend to focus.
Yes.
It focused me on what is really most important.
We'll take a quick break to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I want to thank Carmen. She's my latest patron, and she brings my total supporters to 51 a month, which is really a really wonderful blessing. Friends, I need 300 to cover my portion of the family expenses. We have been literally trusting God to pay for our mortgage for maybe even a year now, and God is faithfully doing so. So if you're in a difficult financial position, then continue to trust God. He is faithful. And if you're in a position where you're able to give and sow into my work, I would really appreciate it. $3 a month will get you onto my Patreon. Anything else that you're able to give is a blessing as well. It goes to keep this show on the air and keep my writing and pastoral work, my sowing into my local community, my kids' pastor work is all volunteer. So you are furthering the kingdom of God here in Guelph and in this country and around the world as those that tune into the show. So thanks for considering that. If you'd like to become a supporter, you can go to patreon.com/JonathanPuddle or go to the show notes and click the link there. Thanks so much.
I remember someone, actually, John Arnott from Catch the Fire, had told me about meeting a man named Richard Vermbrandt, who was a pastor in Romania who was imprisoned and tortured for 14 years. And Vermbrandt had talked with John and told him, John, sometimes I miss that cell. He was in solitary confinement for part of his time. He said, I just miss that cell and the communion I had with God, his presence. And I thought, what's wrong with that guy? That's crazy. Well, this was before I went to prison. And then I spent a lot of time in prison with Richard Vermbrandt because, he became one of my models and heroes. And I can say now that I'm out, I have no desire to go back to prison, but I do miss something from that time because going back to what you were saying, does it purify? Well, what it did is I became the things that caused so much hardship for me. They actually pushed me to focus on God just for survival. It was physical survival in one sense because I had been suicidal, but also just spiritual survival. I was so driven to press into God, to focus on Him throughout the day that it was my whole day revolved around, and my night, just pressing into God. So there was an intensity there that was driven by fear and loneliness and despair. driving me to God. Well, now that I'm removed from those circumstances and I don't have that intense experience going on, then the natural tendency that we have is not to grow in devotion and love for God, it's to decrease. And so the things that drove me are gone now. And so I'm missing that just dependence, the drive to focus myself on God throughout the day. I don't have that now. And I miss it. I don't want to go back to those circumstances. Yeah. But I see what could be. Yes. And that had the uncertainty, the suffering, all of those things they focused me on my walk with God, what really matters. And they really focused me on heaven. And I wrote a song while I was in prison, and the circumstances were important because I had just been told by the Turkish government that they wanted 3 life sentences in solitary confinement with no parole. So this is the rest of my life on my own, isolated in a terrible circumstances. And that really knocked me down. Oh, yeah. I felt like a death sentence. A couple of weeks after that, I was just pacing back and forth and crying out to God, just my emotions, just this dread, this real sense of loss, this sense of loss of my family and of freedom. And then what I said is, you are worthy of my all. You're worthy of my pain, my tears, my suffering. You're worthy of this. And there's a verse in the song that goes, I want to be found worthy to stand before you on that day with no regrets from cowardice or things left undone. And this became my prayer. I sang that song every day after that as a declaration. It was a love song, a song of dedication, of surrender, of declaration of the things that I was doubting and that now I was declaring the goodness, faithfulness, love of God. But it was also something that focused me on, I'm living for that day when I stand before Jesus and saying, I want to stand before you without regrets. And I want you to say, Andrew, I had assignments for you. There were assignments I had for you to complete. There was an inheritance that I had for you in this life. And you lost it because you were a coward or because you were unfaithful. And how terrible that would be. And I said, I don't want to be in prison. I don't want to be here. I just so desire to be back with my family. But if you have assignments for me, I don't want a single one of them to be uncompleted. How would you say that? To fall to the ground. I want to complete every assignment you have for me. And so I fought for that. And this was every day, focusing myself on eternity. That's what I'm living for. I'm going to stand before you. And I want to do that without regrets.
So it's, your salvation is not an issue here. It's really like there's a fullness that you're wanting every last drop.
Yeah, and it took me a while to get there. I'll tell you, just to be very open about it. So I've worked in Turkey 23 years. We had risk. We had difficulties. It was a hard ministry, but we invested ourselves in it, poured ourselves into it. I went at a very broken point in my first year. I said, God, I just renounce it all. Whatever my inheritance is, I renounce it. Just let me get out of this prison and go back to my family. Whatever else you have planned for me, any other assignments, I don't want them. I just want to go back with my family. I can't handle this anymore.
Which I feel like is really understandable.
Yeah. Said, you chose the wrong man. I just am too weak. I can't handle it. Yeah. And I'm willing to be the least in the kingdom of heaven. I don't care. And so months later, what a different thing I'm declaring every day.
Wow.
I want to stand before you without regret. I want to be found worthy to stand before you on that day with no regrets from cowardice or things left undone. So I repent of that. And I say, no, I want every single assignment to be completed. Every one of them. So there was a change from total despair and basically giving up my inheritance, all the labor, and to say, no, I want it all. I want it all. I think of the way I finished. I had just gone through my third trial session, and it was just a disaster. It's a kangaroo court, and they didn't care about truth. It was from the very top of the Turkish government. They were the president was determining what would happen. It had been completely politicized. And so I was in despair about this. And I read read John 18:12, I think it's John 18:12, where Peter says, Jesus, you don't need to go ahead with this. Don't go to, and Jesus says, shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? And it's a rhetorical question. And that Jesus' words, shall I not drink the cup? And it just echoed in my mind just for the next few days, again and again and again. And I said, I need to drink the cup. I need to be willing to drink the cup. And I wrote a letter to Norine. And I said, in this letter, I was just basically writing out a prayer. I want to drink the cup down to the dregs. I want to drink it completely. Whatever cup you have for me, I want to drink it completely. Oh, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can handle it. God, please let me go. But no, I need to drink the cup. I want to drink the cup down to the last dregs. And I sealed that letter up and I sent it. The very next day, suddenly, they came in and said, Andrew, gather your things. We're releasing you to house arrest. So I'd been in prison almost 2 years. Now they were releasing me to be under house arrest. And I was like, oh God, thank you. That's the point that I finished on, was one of surrender. I could have finished off on a terrible thing where I'm, oh God, I just give it all up again. No, I don't, forget it, God. No, but it wasn't. It was, yes, I'll drink the cup. Now that's a daily decision. Yes. Okay. This was a daily battle, but that was what I was aiming for. And God let me finish on that note. Then I went to house arrest and was held there for 2 months. And that was very stressful in its own way. But I did come out with that focus on, I want to serve God's purposes rather than my own. And that took a lot of discipline over time, building that deep into me.
Yes. Thank you. It's incredible. I'm just thinking, like surely in His grace, the Lord would have welcomed you in whatever state you left that prison. But the gift of drawing you back to a place of even of personal dignity for you, for that loop in your life. Yeah, it's something that's in.
If you've read the book, you may remember that in May of 2017, so about 8 months or so into the imprisonment, President Trump asked for his release. And there were reasons, apart from that, things that the Lord had been showing to think that the release would happen at that point. It didn't. It was a huge disappointment, led to a real despair in him, another suicidal period. Hard things, start of medication, etc. But as much as we wanted the release at that time, now as we look back, we see, okay, he was held another 17 months. But all that God did during that time, and one of those, as you said, was to bring him to a much deeper place of surrender. Yes. So that was just one of the many things that God accomplished. God extended the time and did a lot with it.
So something I've said, we were held together for 13 days. And Norine and I were held in a detention center at the beginning. Yeah. So she got a taste of this. Although what I went on to experience was more intense because then I was alone. But she got a taste of it. And what I've said before is, Norine spent 13 days. God had to keep me another 2 years to finish off what He wanted to do in my life. But when we look back on it,
efficiency. Yeah, congratulations.
But more seriously, as I look back on it, I see how God took what was intended for evil and turned it around. Yes. And Norine told me in the process, it was very hard for me to receive this in the time, but she said, if we go through this in a right way, we will not regret the outcome. And she didn't know when she was saying this what that outcome would be. It could be years down the road. But she was saying,
most of the time I thought that there would be a release, that God had given us promises and things that He would do that could only be accomplished outside of prison. Sure. So I thought that at some point, most likely there would be a release. But could that be 2 years? Could it be 5 years? Could it be 10, 15? who knows?
That those promises could be fulfilled in my 70s, and I could, spend 15 to 20 years in a prison if I could hang on for that long. So there was no guarantee. But as I look back, I say, yes, what she said was true. Because of how we finished, then we look back and we say, we don't have regrets. And I see how God used this. And I say, thank you, God, that you took me to Turkey that I was there 25 years. Thank you for that. We wouldn't change that, even though we went through a great difficulty and I was severely tested. I wouldn't change it. God used this. And we have no regrets. We can look back and say, yes, Lord, we have no regrets. And I thank God that he didn't release me earlier on. Oh, I wish I hadn't spent so much time there, but I'm glad that he didn't give me the option of running away when I would have run away. Because what he accomplished and what he changed in me over that progression as he began to rebuild was so important. And so I'm glad that he didn't give me that option.
Yes, wow. Norine, can I ask your days? What did the boring details of your day look like?
Yeah, my time became focused completely on him.
Yes.
There was ministry. There were other things that were going on. I had kids in the States, so those were things there too. But he was the priority. So this is new, uncharted territory. Who do you contact? How do you go about something like this? I just tried to follow up every lead that I could, cast out in every direction. And I found that God has people in all kinds of places that maybe we don't expect it, in government or just in unusual places. And this was really seeing the body at work. The prayer was what fueled the whole thing. But then I saw how God had laid out so many pieces ahead of time, some things even years before, that then
we
he
came to
used
see that
for his release.
He's the grandmaster chess player. I thought, where are you on this, God? What's happening? And then as we look back, we begin to see how so many things were prepared ahead of time.
Yeah, everything from this Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, being part of the denomination that we had transferred. He had transferred his ordination into things like that we could never have known, of course. So I pursued diplomatic things wherever I could. I started some groups that focus on persecution of Christians started to contact me, and then I was trying to figure out, how does this work? Can they work together, etc.? A lot of questions. Keeping the prayer going for him, trying to write to him or when I could, or trying to get in to visit him. So really so much was focused on him. And he had a concern that I would somehow go back to normal life. And I said, if you could just see how I spend my days and how how I'm always thinking about you and always mindful of you.
The issue is that
you wouldn't have that concern.
And I think other prisoners have the same thing. There's a lot of attack, mental, spiritual attack. And one of the things is you'll be forgotten. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to be here. Norine will go back to a normal life and kind of just, go on and enjoy life without me. And I'm stuck in here and I'll be forgotten. And I know that that's not true, but it keeps nagging. It's a spiritual attack. And you've got nothing else to do but sit around all day and think the worst thoughts.
Yes.
And, she told me, she said, my life cannot be normal. I can't go back to normal life if you're not around. We will go back.
I don't want to.
We'll go back to normal life together. I said, please keep telling me this. It sounds pitiful, but I said, I just need to hear this. And so she would often tell me, I'm not going back to normal.
I'm waiting for you.
Yeah.
I love you. I'm here. Things, just repeating some of these things again and again and again. Because for the person who's shut up, who's completely cut off of contact and doesn't know what's going on, it's a very different, it's just a different condition to be in. Sure. And so, it was good to just keep repeating. Sometimes as I'm writing something, I keep saying this, but no problem. I will do it happily.
And this is one of the things to emphasize is one of the main difficulties of the imprisonment. So most of the time I was in high security prisons or a maximum security prison. There's no contact with the outside world. And we had the one visit, weekly, that Norine had to apply for permission to the capital of the country every week to get that permission. So a lot of times I didn't know if she'd have it or not.
Sure.
That was the only contact. And so there was a real sense of isolation. Some of the times when I had the most difficult time and was closest to suicide is when that contact was cut off completely. And so I have no contact with Norine, with anybody else. I'm just in a cell either by myself in isolation or else part of the time I was in a cell built for 8 people with over 20 of us there. It was very crowded, very intense. And the isolation of, in a sense, of my faith. So I'm isolated by culture and language and life experience, nationality. But I was the only Christian. And I was surrounded by Muslims. They're all very strong Muslims. The people I was kept with were there because they were accused of being part of an Islamist group that the Turkish government said was behind a coup attempt. So they were all very strong Muslims. And I was in that spiritual environment where they were praying constantly, 24/7, prayers, chanting of the Quran and things like that. And I had no one I could go to ask my questions or, my doubts or who would correct me. And so that sense of isolation. And so Norine was so important because she was the only Christian I had contact with during those 2 years to come in and encourage me and speak truth to me. So what she did was, she was really my lifeline. I like to think that God would have done something else to keep me going if she had been deported, because she should have been deported. She was arrested to be deported, and then they released her and let her stay in the country. It was never clear if they would make her leave or not. But she was able to stay there and be that lifeline for me and that encouragement that kept me going. Now, she also stayed at personal risk because a number of leaders told her, you need to leave Turkey, because they could put her in prison. But she stayed. And what a love story that she placed herself at risk to minister to me. So people ask me, were you tortured? I say, no, there was nothing physical they did to me. There were at times I thought it might turn to that. There was something, they moved me from that crowded cell eventually to a maximum security prison where they kept me with fewer prisoners because I think there was increasing tension, especially as my case became more visible. And they accused me of all kinds of terrible things that the people I was in my cell with. They knew I wasn't an Islamist, which I'd been accused of as being an Islamist terrorist. But other things they came out in the newspapers and TV. Some of them, I think, were wondering about, is he really a spy? Maybe he does hate Turks. Maybe he, all kinds of things. I forgot what I was going to say.
What would you say to me, to my generation and younger? Because I discover I'm no longer the young generation either. You've spoken about not feeling prepared. You've talked about this refining process, that of the Lord being enough and being worthy. What do you want your children and your grandchildren to learn, to know, to not have to endure the hard way?
Yeah, well, they may endure difficult things, and I would like them not to. There are some people who say, "Oh, persecution is great," and I think, well, it does purify the church, but sometimes it wipes out the church, and so it doesn't always have good results. Sometimes it doesn't build the church. Sometimes persecution is so intense that the church disappears. It's not that the church was unfaithful. It's that it can be very, very intense. Persecution can do that. So I don't want people to come under persecution. I think there is going to be more persecution. You need to have that mentality that, yes, it can come, and I'm going to determine now that I'll be faithful. And the way to prepare for it is first to be aware that it can happen so it doesn't blindside it. Then it's preparing the heart. And there are two things that I think are critical to surviving persecution. And the first is focus on the relationship with God. Focus on intimacy with Him. So it was my love for God and the intimacy built up over years that fueled my perseverance over time. It was very difficult. It was severely tested. But I think that it was my love for God that helped me to bring my mindset around, which was not a matter of emotions, but of the will, to say, you are worthy, you are worth this, I'm going to seek your face. I will be faithful to you, and I will love you even if I have doubts and questions. So that comes from a relationship of love. It's not all emotional at that point when it's being tested, but I think that what will fuel perseverance is that intimacy and love for God. So that's something that needs to be cultivated. As I said before, it's not something that we naturally do, grow in love. You have to go after it. And I actually think that for years I had run after intimacy with God, and I think in one sense that is what positioned me so that God gave me this prison assignment, because He knew that even though I would be severely tested and falter, that I would turn to Him because my heart belongs to Him. There was a true and sincere, cultivated love and devotion for Him. And this is what, in prison, I say, what at first I thought the most important thing is presence of God. And now I'd say I still love God's presence, but now I'd say the thing that was most important for me, that was underlined for me, was to have a faithful devotion. A very simple devotion. I don't understand. I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going to hold on and devote myself to you. The second thing is, so the first is cultivating that devotion and love for God. The second is developing that mindset, which is a fear of God, you could call it, or a heavenly mindset, which I talked about before, which is saying, I'm living for the day I stand before Jesus. And because I did this again and again and day after day after day and focused myself on that began to give me a different perspective on what I was suffering. So yes, it's hard. I don't know how it will end. I feel really weak, but I'm putting my eyes on Jesus and I'm living for that day. And so those are that fear of God, that realigning of priorities, of perspective. When there's a threat that you'll lose your job, I don't think most people will end up going to prison for their faith. But the threat now is that you'll be marginalized or silenced or kicked out of your job if you have any biblical values. Who are you going to fear more? God or the Twitter mob? And so if you cultivate that perspective that says what really matters is what God says about me, I'm going to stand before Him, and I want to stand before Him without regret. I want to be faithful to Him. Then that gives a different perspective when you are making decisions about suffering.
Yes. That's good. Thank you. Would you pray for us, both of you, in this space of making those decisions?
Yeah, I'd like to pray for your listeners what I prayed for myself and for my family many, many times in prison. I prayed many things, but there was one prayer that I often prayed for them. So, Father God, I ask you to pour out on your sons and daughters the courage, the strength, the confidence, the endurance, perseverance, and steadfastness of Jesus, that we may run the race set before us and finish well, a beautiful bride purified in the fires of faithful obedience, tested and found worthy of her beloved, of Jesus, the King of glory.
And Lord, I pray for those listening right now, and I ask that you would bring them near and that they would draw close to you and that they would devote themselves to staying close to you for all their lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Wow. I was really, really impacted by spending time with them, their sincerity of their love of God, very few of us have experienced what Andrew's experienced. And so getting to learn, to listen, to hear what goes through a man's mind and soul and spirit in a trial like that, I felt very privileged. So thank you to Andrew and Norine. Andrew's book is available. It's called God's Hostage, A True Story of Persecution, Imprisonment, and Perseverance. If you check the show notes, you'll find a link to buy it on Amazon. And I recommend you go and check out the book. It's not rainbows and unicorns. Praise God for meeting me in prison. It's a real and raw story of Andrew's daily struggle. But it provides a powerful insight to those who may have a sense in their spirit that they may enter a season of profound persecution and suffering like that. So thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Please share the show if it blessed you. Find me on social media at Jonathan Puddle on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And glad to have you with us. We'll see you again next week.